Shay Smith with that reporting now. Let's get to the finer, conflicting points with the folks actually involved in all this. Brett Farley is the executive director for the Catholic Conference of Oklahoma, and Debbie Veeney is a senior VP of communications and marketing with the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, which opposed this. Good to see you both, and I appreciate you being part of this conversation. Brett, you support this move. Is this not a direct marriage of church and state?
It's not a marriage of church and state. It's simply a continuation of what we've done in the country for quite a while, which is allowing religious institutions to participate in the job of educating our kids. We've done this in the form of ESAs, in the form of tax credits, in the form of scholarships, not only in the state of Oklahoma, but across the country. And so this is just an extension of what we've been doing for decades.
Okay, that would take many people by surprise. And Debbie, I don't know if you want to respond to that, whether this is just in keeping with something we've been doing for decades. I do know last June the Supreme Court ruled that Maine had to allow public funds to subsidize religious charter schools there in Carson v. Macon. Would that apply to Oklahoma? Is this business as usual?
Well, actually, the Carson v. Macon case was a bit different. I want to explain what happened there. This was a place where there were literally no public schools no public high schools that were available to parents, and the state decided that they would allow the parents to be able to select any private school to educate their kid because there was not a public school available. And the courts decided, rightly, that they could not only have funds go to a non-sectarian private school, that they had to also allow these funds to be able to go to a sectarian private school. The key here is that we're talking about funding private education in that case.
Okay, so this is business as usual, or it's not?
It is not. Carson v. Macon was about private schools.
Okay. Got it. Brett.
And the problem with that
we just set this up
is that the Supreme Court, go ahead. No, I was just going to say the Supreme Court in that decision did not address the availability of public schools. They simply said that the state doesn't have to fund private schools. But if they do, if they offer a program of public support, they can't discriminate against religious schools simply because they're religious. They said that not just in Carson, but also in the Espinoza decision prior to that. And so they literally said, like we've said before, you can't discriminate against religious schools because they're religious. It doesn't matter whether there's availability of public schools or not. The point is, you can't tell a religious school they can't participate simply because of the nature of their identification.
Brett, explain to me how religious this is going to be, because there are some religious schools, but really they're just really good private schools. When we're talking about this one here, funded by taxpayers, are the kids going to be educated in the Bible? They'll be learning John the Baptist and Ecclesiastes. Do they have to attend virtual mass, the traditional Catholic education?
The education that we envision for this school is not going to be much different than what we see in a traditional Catholic school. Now,
really?
A lot of folks will sort of take exception to that. The problem is that's also the case for Catholic schools that are taking advantage of the existing school choice programs, like I said, ESAs, for instance, tax credits and scholarships, which are all also funded by tax dollars. The problem that our opponents have here is they've got to demonstrate what the difference is between those programs and a charter program. They're going to say, well, tax dollars are going directly to the religious school in a charter situation, and so that's the distinction. But we believe that's a distinction without a difference, because at the end of the day, parents are still making the choice whether they're going to send their kids to those schools. So the operative action in this situation is the parents choosing. So whether the money's going to the parent and then to the school or directly to the school, really, as I said, is a distinction without a difference.
I see. Well, can I ask you something real quick? You know, a lot of fights we've seen conservatives say, whether it's a teachers union or a labor union, I don't want to have to pay this because my money's going to be used for something I don't believe in. How is that different than Oklahoma taxpayers who say, I don't support Catholic education. I don't want my money going to that?
Sure. It's a valid question, but it's already the case. I mean, that's an argument they could make in opposition to ESAs and tax credits. The Governor Stitt 2 weeks ago signed into law one of the most groundbreaking tax credit programs in the country. That argument could be leveled against that program as well. So you've got tax dollars going directly to Catholic schools and all kinds of religious schools. So that argument doesn't hold up very well.
Debbie, we just had in the story there, you know, someone was laying out there is not going to be discrimination. That is not legally allowed. But in private schools, you do have quite a bit of latitude, and the teachers kind of run the room in some ways. Are you concerned that there might be pressure on students to, convert, or there could be shaming of gay or Muslim or sexually active kids? Is that allowed? Is that a concern?
Charter schools are public schools, period. And I wanted to state again that the case law that has been referenced refers to private schools, the funding of tax dollars for private schools.
Okay.
So charter schools as private schools must be able to operate with the same protections for civil rights and for the Establishment Clause as any other public school. And actually, I'm kind of puzzled that the Catholic Church would be amenable to letting the government intercede in a way and possibly put restrictions on them in the way of policies that might conflict with what some of their religious values are, because that's what happens when you're a public school.
Understood. Okay, Brett, I want to see how far this does extend for, the Catholic groups that are supporting this. When, let's say, the Wiccan Educators Association one day applies for their charter license and wants the same treatment, saying, I want to be treated like the Catholics, will you support them?
We're going to broadly support religious liberty no matter what the group is. But here's the point. Market forces are still in effect on this. And the same argument can be made, again, I'm reiterating this point here, but it's true. These schools could still be established to take advantage of an ESA or a tax credit. Why aren't they? Why isn't there a school of Satanism taking advantage of this new tax credit program? Because there's not demand for it. So you still have to contend with the market forces and parents demanding certain kinds of education, certain sources of education. The reason those schools haven't been established under existing programs is because there's no demand for it. So while theoretically it's possible, practically it just isn't going to make sense. Now, I want to go back and address the question of whether charter schools are state actors. That actually is not an easy answer because it's one that's being contended in the Supreme Court right now. If that answer were true, then we wouldn't have a case like we do with Peltier at the Supreme Court right now. The fact of the matter is there are 45 different charter programs across the country, and every single one of them are different. So while one may characterize charter schools as state actors, another one may not. What we've done here in Oklahoma is unique to Oklahoma and our charter arrangement in Oklahoma. Our charter schools are essentially private schools that happen to be publicly funded. In the state of Texas, this is not something that I would advise doing because their arrangement is completely different than ours.
I see. I was wondering what you were going to say about, you said the school of Satanism or what have you, but if there were a demand to say we'd support broadly, those who want to start up a school like that, okay, with public money. So, Debbie, what we do seem to agree on here in this conversation is that charter schools can be a very good thing. I mean, here in D.C., charter schools tend to be the good schools. A lot of us put our kids in the lottery hoping to get in a good one. This, I'm sure, will be challenged in court from Oklahoma. Will it be stricken down?
We believe that it will be. And I'm going to also state for the record, I'm a proud a Catholic school graduate. So I don't have a problem philosophically with Catholic schools. I do fundamentally believe that it is going to be stricken down because these are public schools. Charter schools are public schools. And they're a great option for a number of families. And I think that Catholic schools are also a great option for a number of families. And there's some great things like ESAs and vouchers, which have been mentioned several times during this discussion, which are wonderful. And there's a great program here in Washington, D.C. I'm here where you are, the D.C. Opportunity Choice Scholarship Program, which has helped a lot of families be able to afford a Catholic education. I think that's all wonderful.
I didn't know that. Interesting. But real quick, Debbie, can I ask, do you really believe that this court, I think I read in the New York Times this morning, they've sided with religious groups in recent years like 80% of the time. You really believe this is going to be stricken down with this court?
I do, because once again, we've been talking about private schools. And the courts have been correct in determining that it is absolutely unreasonable. It's a violation of the First Amendment. It's religious discrimination to treat one type of entity different than you would treat another if you're going to be giving public funds to private entities. The distinction here is this is talking about giving public funds to a public entity, which would then not operate in the way that we've always known public schools to operate, which is being non-sectarian.
Understood. Brett, finally, do you think more Catholic organizations, I know you said maybe in Texas this wouldn't work. How about other areas? Do you think fellow Catholic organizations are going to try to stand up public charter schools in other states?
It's certainly possible, as we've seen with other iterations of school choice. When one state comes out and implements a groundbreaking program, other states usually jump on board pretty quickly. But every state's got a different situation, so we do know there's a lot of interest in the possibility. But with 45 completely different programs, each one of them are going to have to view this on their own and decide whether this is something that makes sense in their state. There certainly will be some. How many, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I see. Brett Farley, Debbie Vini, I know you think about this differently. I appreciate a civil, thoughtful discussion tonight. And also, I learned something about our public school system here in Washington, D.C. in the process. Thank you so much, you guys.